But for whatever reason, the company deciding to release something that has these issues, um, and then sort of taking care of it post mortem, post release. I obviously we were not the first game to do that. Like a very notorious example is Cyberpunk, and there have been others.
Mhm.
Um, and as a gamer, as a consumer, I don't love that. I
Mhm.
don't love that model. I don't like that moving forward.
And ladies and gentlemen, that individual's Alex Hernandez with wise words, and he infamously played Mind's Eye's Jacob Diaz, the lead actor, and him speaking out about these unfinished buggy disasters. It's really notable because he's been through this before. He was the main lead for Mafia 3 years ago. Another experience that ended up disappointing a lot because of just, it was unfinished and it was also buggy in many regards. I know a lot of people forget, but Mafia 3, just many issues, and here he is, again, front and center with another game, this one just a lot worse. And say what you will, but Mind's Eye has followed the trajectory of all of these notable failures the last number of years, in which we're seeing mass refunds that have been given out, although seems to be the extent of it, it's unclear, but the reviews have come in. This is going to be one of the worst games in the last decade, maybe of all time. It really is that bad. And this isn't just some small random development team. This is Leslie Benzies, the GTA 5 guy. He's the main individual right at the top of those credits. He's behind one of the most profitable pieces of entertainment of all time. Expectations were high. He brought in a team of bunch of talented individuals that also worked at Rockstar North under him, and they delivered just trash. So that's the best way to describe Mind's Eye. And ultimately, Mind's Eye wasn't what they were chasing. They were chasing user-generated content. That was the whole plan. That's why Mind's Eye was supposed to be under everywhere. Everywhere was like a Fortnite type thing going on. It was a mess of epic proportions, but it's quite clear that their intention was to chase trends and try to have mass ambitions on the level and the scope of like Roblox. But obviously that has not come to plan, and right now they're suffering mass layoffs and really no future. I just don't see the outlook moving forward. And yet, as of recording this video, we got this bombshell of an update. Ex-GTA producer, which is the CEO Leslie Benzies, reportedly blames Mind's Eye flopping on saboteurs and promising a relaunch, which is just delusional 101, and also shows that these individuals, these executives, cannot take ownership that they made a truly bad game, a historically bad game. And that really has personified the AAA games industry. Just non-stop failures, unfinished disaster, chasing trends, over monetization. It just keeps on happening, and lessons do not get learned in this industry. Now, while Alex Hernandez says all these wise words about how, consumers and gamers are just really disgusted by all these unfinished games, that they just keep on happening, and nobody on the executive level at these AAA studios are really doing anything to stop it, because most of them have the mentality of, well, we'll fix it eventually. Like Monster Hunter Wilds is the perfect example. This should be a Game of the Year contender. It received universal acclaim from critics and users, except for the fact that the game doesn't run really at all on PC. And we're now about 3-4 months removed. Barely any people are playing this experience compared to Monster Hunter Worlds. And many people are talking about, where is Capcom? Where's the updates? Why is this game not functional? And they've been delivering a couple of updates here and there that have just made the game even worse for many users. Even right now, after a new title update, you have Games Media running around celebrating it. But the fact is, if you look to the Steam page, there's still an overwhelmingly negative rating, with many people saying that their game is now permanently bricked and it's even worse than beforehand. This is just the state of this industry. That's why so many people are disgusted with what we're seeing, because it just keeps on happening, and it is a growing problem. It's not like this is just an isolated incident in which maybe one game's broken. It just feels like every other experience is going through these lows. But even when you're not talking about broken launches and unfinished content, I mean, you got to look at like modern day Blizzard Entertainment, one of the titans of this video game industry, and this is the type of content that they're delivering in World of Warcraft right now. This is embarrassing, and I don't care what people say. They have the funding, they have a backing of a $1 trillion company that obviously isn't giving them the funds or the support, there's no excuse for stuff like this. I really don't understand why this looks as bad as it does, but this is just what we're getting from these companies. I'm almost disappointed in myself thinking that Microsoft, them acquiring Activision Blizzard, we would get better content and things would get, it just has not gone that way at all. And that's why when you have a massive gaming event like Summer Game Fest, in which you have tons of reveals, tons of excitement, about 1 million people live watching, and you end the showcase with Call of Duty Black Ops 7, it is insulting to the gaming audience because we know what we're going to get from Call of Duty. It is mediocreness. It's a franchise that just relies heavily on nostalgia. They're not evolving, they're not improving. Call of Duty is what it is. That's why when we saw this amazing cinematic, it looked really interesting. We all know what we're getting. We're getting a 3 to 4 hour campaign, which ends up being pretty mediocre, sometimes god-awful, as we saw with Modern Warfare 3 recently. But Call of Duty is what it is. Their focus is on microtransactions, monetization, and chasing trends. That's what Call of Duty is good for these days. And even Madden, that's another example. They revealed a new debut trailer. This has like about 10,000 dislikes to 15,000 likes. And they're revealing content, things that have been in this franchise for over a decade, and trying to sell people on this as it's new, it's innovative. No, it's not. This is just a franchise that has run out of excuses for why it still costs $70, $80 and much more for other editions, and over monetization with microtransactions. And then obviously there's Remedy Entertainment. If you didn't know, they worked on a live service multiplayer experience. It was a spin-off to Control. You typically associate this company with games like Control, Alan Wake, and yet this is just another example of a single-player developer dabbling into multiplayer stuff that they have just no business with. And if you didn't know anything about FBC Firebreak before today, well, it looks like you're not alone, because this game is like in the low digits on Steam. And that's because there is zero interest. There was a zero audience asking for something like this, and Remedy Entertainment's even admitting not everything has gone well for Firebreak. Pledges to improve the shooter as it launches to mixed Steam rating. Because again, this is just another example. There was no hype, no anticipation behind this, and even worse, it launched to mediocre reviews. That is the worst thing you could have for a multiplayer offering like this. And then there's Bungie's Marathon, which we've talked extensively about in recent months, from the stolen art controversy to many other, questions and concerns in regards to the performance of Marathon, the lack of interest that came from its closed alpha. And recently we got the announcement that Bungie was delaying Marathon indefinitely, which was great. Some people like myself was hopeful that they were going to be, massively rebooting this game, going back to the boards, but no, they're not. They're just doing some minor changes here and there. They're going to announce a release date later this year, probably for the springtime. And again, serious questions about this being a paid experience and also entering into a market in which there's just little want for this. And this is just one of those things that Sony is not learning from. They keep on saying all the wrong things. Like they said that they believed Concord, the failure of last year, the massive one, it failed because of an overly competitive market. Not going to be making the same mistakes with Marathon, yet they're not learning the lessons, because Concord had a lot more going on than just it entering an overly competitive market, from terrible character design to it being a charged experience. Sony is not learning, and these AAA executives are putting fingers in their ears, because it's not just Sony. We're seeing this from all of these AAA studios. A lot of these, titans that have made this industry what it was the last decade or two, but they are failing to understand their audience, and that's why there is a pivot for all these other developers, these upcoming studios that really have defined this gaming industry the last year or two, and is one of the big things that really makes me hopeful for the future. And that is actually one thing that Jeff Keighley brilliantly brought up at Summer Game Fest a number of weeks ago. He was talking about Expedition 33 and all these other, smaller-ish studios taking off. And more specifically, it was this graphic. Obviously, you have a massive game there, Helldivers 2, but Arrowhead Studios, the development team behind that game, they weren't that a couple of years ago. All the success that came, obviously now people look at that as like the go-to Sony PlayStation Live service. Palworld's another big story. Obviously that has taken off, made, Pocket Pair, the development team, massive amounts of money, but another story in which a smaller development team, just dozens of developers, and Manor Lords and Balatro made by a single developer. There's a reason to be excited when you see these types of games taking off, and that's what really gets me excited about the future. But there's also some games shown during Summer Game Fest and afterwards the last couple of weeks that continue to get me excited about the future, because Chronicles Medieval, Mountain Blade-like dynamic medieval sandbox RPG coming out next year in early access. I've been dreaming of a game like this, and here it is. And then Mundfish, say what you will about this studio, there was so many accusations over the last decade or so that Atomic Heart, the original, was going to be a fake. It wasn't real. Ended up releasing to mediocre reviews, but they came out with a massive presence during Summer Game Fest, in which we saw these, Atomic Heart 2, which is a spiritual successor. It's going to be a role-playing game, but it impressed me because it looks fascinating, the scope and scale that they're aiming for. And then there was also the fact that on the publishing side, they have this new first-person horror game that looks creepy and weird called Ill, coming from Team Cloud. This is something that's been worked on for a while, but that trailer, it just gets me so excited seeing this coming from development teams that I wasn't even thinking of before yesterday. And we've seen in interviews they've been talking about these games. Obviously, there was also the spin-off The Cube, which is another multiplayer offering, but it's also another thing that just very weird and very creative. And that's something that's missing when you have all this trend chasing coming from this AAA games industry, in which you're kind of just used to the game style and everything that they're trying to do. And a lot of the times, as we've seen with notable failures the last couple of years, it's development teams, single player developers sometimes, in which they're entering into genres that they're just not prepared for. And they're not there for an audience, and they just don't have a reason for that except for chasing trends and chasing money. And we've seen in interviews from the developers behind Atomic Heart 2, they've said that they're trying to learn from the AAA games industry. They're trying to learn from the notable failures like Mass Effect Andromeda and Cyberpunk 2077. They said that we both study successes and spectacular failures. This is one of the lead developers behind Mundfish and Atomic Heart 2, saying our goal is to nail pacing and meaningful choices, not just scatter quests across a big map. Whether they can avoid the trap of more is better remains the franchise's biggest question. And there is no given answer that, Atomic Heart 2 is going to be Game of the Year in 2028 or whenever it releases. But I am excited about the prospects of this game and the ambition and scale that they're aiming for, especially at a time in which it feels like so many of the prominent RPG players from BioWare to Bethesda, they're playing it safe in terms of design. And really, they're trailing in terms of what other RPG developers are now delivering to audiences. But say what you will about the AAA games industry, hell, I'm playing Death Stranding right now, and I'm impressed by Hideo Kojima and what he's produced. But Hideo Kojima always delivers, honestly. From Metal Gear to now Death Stranding 2, just a notable gaming creator. But we've seen the last week or two, the last couple weeks, some really impressive experiences still coming from the AAA games industry. The new 007 game from IO Interactive really impressed me with what it's aiming for. Game Freak even showed that besides them making really terrible and mediocre Pokemon experiences, they can do far more, which honestly just makes things even more bleak and almost more questionable about why is Pokemon so dog shit, and then you look at the what they're actually building when they actually care. So those are questions that remain, but definitely one of those things that's just like, wow, Game Freak can actually do so much more when they want to. And of all the upcoming games that people are talking about, the one that has garnered the most impressions the last week or two has to be NetEase's surprise AAA experience, Blood Message, which, yeah, fans are comparing it to Uncharted and Tomb Raider. It's been described as a story-driven single-player action-adventure set in ancient China. It's anchored in cinematic storytelling, visceral, realistic combat that blends stealth and survival mechanics, and it looks absolutely fantastic. And furthermore, games analyst Daniel Ahmad, who covers a lot of China-related studios and stuff, said that the project was greenlit around 5 years ago, is a pure single-player premium game, no free-to-play, no live service stuff, will be released on PC and console, was produced by Hugh Zhepeng, who has been at NetEase since 2007, and was responsible for some of their hit PC MMORPGs. Again, we're seeing that switch. A lot of studios in China, this is what they were all about. That is no longer the case. Interests have changed. And it's developed by 24 Entertainment, but a separate team than the current Naraka Blade Point team. Team includes a high number of ex-Ubisoft developers. I wonder what studio reminds me of that? You know, the one that's right there in the Game of the Year conversation. Expedition 33, made by a couple of Ubisoft developers and a bunch of other juniors under them. But yeah, these ex-Ubisoft devs, imagine this game delivers and it's just another example of all of that talent that Ubisoft had, and it was all wasted, and all these individuals had to go elsewhere to create phenomenal products. Really says a lot about that environment of 14,000 employees and the non-stop Assassin's Creed games we keep getting. It uses Unreal Engine 5. It's not a Souls-like, but realistic, brutal melee combat with use of the interactive environment. And again, it's set to surpass 10 million views on Bilibili. It's also passed millions also on YouTube and other places right now, as it seems like worldwide people are drawn to this experience. But it's not just a game like Blood Message that has been garnering a lot of anticipation. It's also projects like Crimson Desert, which has been compared to like a mashup of like Red Dead meets Witcher meets Zelda Breath of the Wild, and so far the gameplay just looks insane. And some of the previews have brought up that it looks futuristic with the tech that they're using, from small things like hair collision, draw distance, and dynamic weather that have a huge impact on immersion, to big things like seamless loading, ocean and shallow water simulation, and optimization so good you don't need a supercomputer to enjoy it all. That last part is one thing I swear so many games you actually need a supercomputer just to run most of these games. So hearing that, it's encouraging, and I hope that ends up being the case with Crimson Desert. But again, this is an experience. It's supposed to be releasing late 2025. We'll see if they actually meet that deadline. But even in interviews, the company's CEO that represents, I think, their European region, was asked in an interview with Jeux Actu, which is a French games outlet. They said in recent years, for about 4 or 5 years, we felt that Western games have slowed down. Fewer ideas, long production times, disappointing or poor results. Libby Park actually answered this question, giving an extensive answer, which I really think paints a perfect picture, for the most part, of the AAA landscape and what's gone wrong. She says, I think it's true that in some cases the games industry has indeed undergone a significant shift, where fewer groundbreaking ideas are emerging, production times have increased, and many high-profile releases have disappointed audiences. This trend can be explained by several factors. The first is the increase in market expectations. Over the past decade, AAA and indie games have significantly raised the bar, setting high standards for quality and innovation. Trends within the industry are constantly evolving, challenging studios to keep pace and meet these changing demands. As a result, production times and budgets are often impacted as studios strive to deliver experiences that resonate with players. When certain aspects of a game fail to meet these dynamic expectations, even if the game is well designed, players can be disappointed. The second factor, and I think this is the big one, is rising production costs and risk aversion. The cost of developing AAA games has skyrocketed, with budgets for top titles often exceeding hundreds of millions of dollars. As a result, many developers and publishers are turning to safe bets, working on sequels, spin-offs, or familiar genres with an established audience. While this strategy minimizes financial risk, it also means that fewer new ideas are approved and innovation can feel stagnant. From a gamer's perspective, this can be disappointing, as they perceive the industry as less willing to take creative risks or explore new concepts. The third is the broader public interest in diverse cultural content. There's a growing trend among gamers and entertainment consumers in general to embrace new genre stories and cultural perspectives. For example, K-pop and Squid Game. Webtoons and games like Black Desert Online have captivated global audiences. This cultural shift reflects a desire for diversity in entertainment, with players becoming more open to unfamiliar themes, gameplay mechanics, and narratives. In comparison, Western games that stick to familiar genres and formulas may seem less fresh or innovative, especially when audiences have already experienced unique offerings from other regions. This coming from one of the CEOs that represents the company that is right now building Crimson Desert, that thus far looks like it could be a dream game if it does deliver on everything that they're building. The one thing I will say about these remarks is the fact that it's a lot here, but it really does point out the fact that, yes, this AAA games industry is risk averse. They do not want to take crazy, wild chances on single player experiences. The only crazy, wild thing that they can come up with is, hey, let's do a live service. That's what we see out of all these notable single player developers, whether that be Naughty Dog, and they abandoned that last second with The Last of Us Online. We saw Bethesda with that with Fallout 76. BioWare tried that with Anthem. Rocksteady tried that with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And there's very little success on the board with any of these studios and these attempts. So the risk adversity is definitely one thing that has plagued this industry, but it's also the amount of work and the amount of talent that has been put on these live service projects, and they've gone absolutely nowhere. We've seen how that's impacted PlayStation this console generation, and it's really just been a generation that's been wasted because of these poor investments. And now we look to the PlayStation 6, hopefully seeing Sony change things, getting back on board, but based on some of the remarks and some of the investments that they've made, looks like we could continue to see more disasters on the way. Because Fair Games, Marathon, those are games still in development, and who knows what else is coming into the future. A lot of us didn't know God of War Online was something that was in the works at Sony, but it very much was, and who knows what else they're cooking. But even CD Projekt Red, we just talked recently about the Witcher 4 tech demo, which was a tech demo showing off the Unreal Engine 5 new capabilities, not the actual game of The Witcher 4, but so many people missed that. They were enamored by these NPC interactions, and a lot of people missed the fact that CDPR had to clarify, say, no, this is just some of the assets that's going to be in the game. It's not an actual representation, which almost feels like a mistake to do something like that considering their history. That's why with a company like Rebel Wolves, which is composed of a bunch of former CD Projekt Red developers that worked on The Witcher 3, including the game director, they released a new demo for their upcoming RPG, The Blood of Dawnwalker, which I believe is supposed to be releasing next year, and it looks absolutely fantastic. There's definitely some complaints here, but this is the point of a demo like this, a game that's in active development. There should be little things here that people take issue with. There should be things that people are impressed by, and myself, I see that Witcher 3 DNA all over this project, and it gets me extremely excited. But they're also not just making this standard sequel or standard single-player adventure. They're trying to do some experimental things, and a lot of that has to do with time. They want us to be able to see, like, if a building's on fire, they want us to actually go there and have to, make a decision about that specific situation and not walk away and go do a bunch of quests. It's a different type of experience, and I don't know if it's going to resonate great with all of audiences, but I respect the attempt that they're trying to do. They want to disrupt the RPG genre as much as The Witcher 3 did back in the day around 2015. And we've also heard, even from the developers that work at Rebel Wolves, the entire studio culture is the anti-CDPR. We've heard so much about the crunch culture and how the development of Cyberpunk 2077 was such a disaster, and there's been concerns that has still continued at CDPR, but Rebel Wolves is all about trying to make sure that they're not overinflated with developers, having 500 to 1,000 people. They want to be a smaller studio like they were back in the early days at CDPR, and I really do think that benefits so many different studios. We saw how that benefited Expedition 33, and I do think that that model is a successful one. That is something that could be incorporated and work well with a number of other studios. Having a cohesive vision is something that's really difficult when you have thousands of individuals working around the world, but when you have one, studio with maybe dozens of developers coming together, working together, things just work a lot better, and I think that really goes for anything, even outside of gaming. I think a lot of you understand that. But one of the big surprises this summer, and something that really got my attention, was the fact that the CRPG gods over at Owlcat Games have finally decided that they want to do something different. They're known for their work on Rogue Trader as well as Pathfinder, and now Owlcat Games is working on an Expanse RPG with Mass Effect style combat. It's called Osiris Reborn. It's an original story in the sci-fi universe. I absolutely love the original Expanse TV series, and I know a lot of people absolutely love the books, but they actually said that they, again, are following the original Mass Effect trilogy. This is one of the lead developers on this, the game design producer from Owlcat Games, saying that was absolutely an inspiration for the team. It was iconic for the Xbox 360 generation of gamers. Many of us first played it in our teenage years, and it left a lasting impression. We are building on that legacy and expanding what players anticipate from this experience. Our story is deeply rooted in hard science fiction. One of the core reasons the Expanse universe resonates so well with its fans, the combat reflects the standards of modern action gameplay. The narrative emphasizes political tension and moral complexity, and yes, there's romances too. This coming from one of the, again, lead developers at Owlcat Games. And again, this seems like a massive pivot, but this is a team. This is the risk adversity that we don't see from the AAA games industry. But Owlcat Games is trying to make that jump, and they're looking at the Mass Effect franchise for inspiration. And compare that to what's going on with modern day Blizzard, and my head, honestly, I get a headache from thinking about it. Just recently, Jason Schreier of Bloomberg wrote kind of a fluff piece about why Dragon Age Veilguard was so bad and why it failed, and largely he wrote that Electronic Arts executives interfered. And while that is probably true to an extent, it is worth mentioning that BioWare developers actually responded to this report saying they disagreed with it, and they said that they made the best game that they could have made, and they were proud of it. And if that's not delusional, I don't know what is. These individuals just don't understand the audience, and a lot of these individuals that work at modern day BioWare, that's just not the BioWare that many of us fell in love with. It's a shell of itself. The talent that made Mass Effect and Dragon Age what they were are long gone. And now it is time for newer or lesser known studios to rise up and set a new standard. The RPG genre has already been disrupted by the likes of Larian and Sandfall the last year or so, and I'm hopeful Owlcat is the next one to become a household name. The AAA industry is flatlining. Not commercially, they'll keep raking in millions off name recognition and marketing budgets that dwarf the GDP of smaller countries, but creatively, no. You can feel it in the reactions to PlayStation's State of Play, to Xbox's Showcase, to Summer Game Fest. The crowd isn't silent, they're just bored. And when players are excited, it's almost never for the billion-dollar behemoths, maybe besides Rockstar and GTA 6 and whatever From Software's up to. It's for the weird, ambitious, flawed, but fearless projects coming from studios most people hadn't even heard of a year ago. Games like Blood Message and Owlcat's The Expanse RPG weren't even supposed to be major players in the upcoming hype cycle. One is being made by a team under NetEase, a name that until recently meant mobile monetization schemes and live service junk. The other is being built by Owlcat. Yeah, Pathfinder Owlcat, a studio that somehow went from CRPG niche to one of the most watched RPG devs on the planet. These aren't even supposed to be the games generating buzz, but they are, and the AAA industry should be worried. This year has been full of these rocket launches from smaller, non-AAA studios that are dropping games that feel like they actually give a shit about creativity. Not about monetization targets or genre accessibility, just about making something cool, something distinct. From Blood Message to Exodus to Mouse PI for Hire to Killer Bean to Blood of Dawnwalker to so on and so forth, these are the titles people have been talking about. You can't fake that kind of excitement. You can't manufacture it with a marketing budget. And it's not just that what these games are, it's what they aren't. They aren't focus tested to death. They don't need 3 minutes of developer voiceover explaining why this time Assassin's Creed or Call of Duty is different. They don't throw buzzwords around like dynamic gameplay loop or immersive story-driven content. They show up, they look great, and they let players imagine what the full version could be. That's what gets people talking here in 2025, not the 18th version of a franchise with 100 hours of map markers or the same game modes that we've seen time and time again. There's a generational shift happening in real time. Players are getting tired of being sold half-finished $70 products with day one patches and battle passes stapled on. They're gravitating towards games that feel handcrafted, that clearly reflect the vision of the people making them. It's why people still talk about Baldur's Gate 3 more than Starfield, why Black Myth Wukong had more people interested in 60 seconds of gameplay than Dragon Age Veilguard got from its whole launch. There's a hunger for risk again, for identity, for vision, and the future looks better than it has in a decade. The studios making these breakout hits aren't going away. The indie and AA space isn't just catching up, they're outpacing AAA where it counts. And honestly, that gets me excited for the future. There's just so much soul, so much talent, so much focus and vision coming from studios that a lot of us have never heard of, and we're going to keep on seeing that happen. But what do you make of the state of the AAA games industry and the rise of so many newer studios? Let me know your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. But thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.